Hello everyone, welcome back to some League of Legends DFS Esports Breakdown for February the 3rd, back after a small break last night. We can quickly go through the recap. Nothing huge happened other than Hanwha Life getting the upset over T1, and then Bro got the small upset over DRX. Over in the LPL, things all went according to plan. JDG got the 2-0 over NIP, and TES got the 2-0 over RA. So pretty interesting stuff. We do have the 4-gamer returning tomorrow. Should be a pretty interesting one. Obviously, this game is at nighttime, so the LCK weekend games start a little bit earlier, so keep that in mind. Should be pretty interesting stuff going forward, but yeah, we'll go ahead and get started. Odds-wise, right off the bat, the two LCK games are pretty one-sided odds-wise. I don't know if I necessarily agree with all of it, but I mean, I don't love the LCK overall at all right now. The games seem pretty slow and pretty random. I don't love the LCK at all, but I feel like LPL we have a decent pulse on. Should be pretty interesting stuff, so we'll start over in the LPL as we typically do. First series up is Ultra Prime versus FPX. I actually do have a pretty solid lean on both of these games, actually. FPX versus Ultra Prime here. I feel like Ultra Prime looked very, very bad in their most recent match. I feel like they've not shown a lot in either of their series so far. Let's see, Ultra Prime. Yeah, versus AL, and they got swept by NIP. Obviously, that's looking a little bit worse as time goes on. NIP is looking pretty bad. Obviously, they got the 2-1 over AL, and obviously we know that that battle there between them and AL was not interesting by any stretch. So I think my stance is going to be pretty clear here. I feel like Ultra Prime has looked very, very bad so far. I feel like FPX is at least somewhat competent. I'm honestly pretty surprised by the odds that we have on this match. FPX minus 145. I feel like they are a good bit better than Ultra Prime is. I don't think it's like a huge discrepancy by any means, but yeah, I do not agree with that at all. I feel like FPX should be like a minus 200 or so. I think this is pretty one-sided, honestly. I feel like Ultra Prime really are that bad. I feel like FPX are at least somewhat competent. Yeah, I don't think there's really too much more to say there. I do like FPX here a good bit. And then over in the Ultra Prime Anyone's Legend versus LGD. This is going to be interesting. This is a battle between two of the absolute worst teams I've ever had this pleasure of watching. AL are the minus 150 favorite. I'm going to go out on a limb and I'm going to say that AL should not be a favorite against anyone. And they are minus 155 here against LGD. I am going to be going with the LGD side pretty confidently here. As much as I do love AL, obviously I've kind of been a known fan of them and had so much belief in them before. The two series that they've played so far have been very, or 3 series, I think, yeah. They got swept by IG, who is obviously looking pretty strong now, not a big deal. They got swept by TES, obviously TES very strong, not that big of a deal either. Obviously this series versus Ultra Prime, I don't know, it's tough. Ultra Prime is pretty bad as well. I think this series is it's just the complete bottom feeders. I think LGD on paper looks like probably the worst lineup in the league, but AL have been playing like it. I'm gonna go again side with the LGD side here. I think they at least have some like pieces like Meteor, LPC, and Jin Zhao. I think are okay enough. And I feel like we've just seen with this meta from the AL bottom lane not been inspiring really at all. They're pretty over owned as well in DFS. I feel like people still have a little bit of a misconception on what AL does. Obviously, I've been a proponent of this as well. I do like how they have in the past they were a super aggressive team. They could make a lot of games very fun and interesting. I feel like the perception of them is still a little bit overhyped in terms of what they actually do. They are a little bit of a more active team when it does come down to their stats and like combined kills per minute and stuff. But either way, I feel like they are being a good bit overvalued on the DFS aspect. I think we saw that pretty heavily last week when when they were like a 50-50 with Ultra Prime, and we saw AL I think end up being like 10 to 15% higher owned. Granted, I think it was just a 2 game or so with 4 teams. But I still think AL is kind of potentially very high, is over owned very often. I feel like, I don't know, LGD will be, like, I think, a relatively popular underdog just because they are an underdog in the LPL, a slight underdog, that is. Obviously, the 2 LCK games are odds-wise pretty one-sided, so that doesn't leave that many options for underdogs. So I don't expect LGD to be under-owned. I would say probably like in that 10 to 15% area, and I'm definitely willing to go to that direction. I do like LGD a good bit here. As much as it pains me to say, I do worry that this is the time when AL are actually going to step it up. That would just be a complete dagger to me, in my opinion. Like, that would just be so sad. Spend all this time riding AL, and then the second I get off of them, they come through. That would be pretty sad. But I just feel like we have to take a look at this one objectively, and AL objectively have been pretty tragic in pretty much every aspect. The slight caveat there is they played 2 pretty strong teams in IG and Top Esports. We only really have 1 series of them, and it was versus Ultra Prime, and it is their first series with pins. But again, I feel like even when we look at like Betty, Swordart, ZDZ, Xiaohao, these players who are supposed to be good, obviously Betty just has not been quite the same since that Jinx Aphelios meta where we loved him so much. He should strive in this meta, but he just has not. Swordart has not looked good. Xiaohao has not looked very good. Obviously, they have not had the mid lane production that they need. ZDZ has just not looked good. I don't know. Maybe this is the series they pull it together, but I just have not seen really any spark of hope from them. Over on the LGD side, again, they had a close series versus RA. Obviously, RA is not quite that bad, and that same versus OMG. They did lose to 2 like relatively middling teams, so we don't have too much of a grasp of where LGD is. But I think they've at least shown some glimmers and some positive, especially when we do look at somebody like Meteor, who is a super exciting player in his own right. So for that reason, I just have to ride LGD here. I think this is a pretty straightforward slate for me, in my opinion. I'm just going to team up FPX and LGD in a couple different variations and probably call it a day there. I'm just not too inspired by either of these LCK matchups. When we look at Gen G and KT Rolster being both minus 400 or greater, I just don't see it. I really just don't believe it. I don't know. It's just pretty uninspiring. The LCK just is such a disastrous place to go. Obviously, Gen G are 4-1. They've lost to T1. Oh, they dropped a game to Hanwha. Obviously, Hanwha's been kind of all the way up and down. They got the win over Gen G and T1, and they've lost to Sandbox, KDF, and KT. Just the craziest thing to think about. Over on the LSB side, again, they beat Nongshim. They beat Bro. They beat KT. They beat Hanwha. They've lost to Damwon. So it's like, where are they really? I think the odds on this are a little bit over one-sided. Like, I don't think Gen G should be minus 425, but I don't necessarily love the LSB side enough to go to that side either. I definitely wouldn't be shocked to see that one. Like, I wouldn't hate looking at the LSB side here at all. Maybe like a small sprinkle, a small, a very small dabble. Like if I was to make 20 lineups, or like hypothetically, I'd probably make a 2 or 3, like maybe 4 live sandbox ones. Like, I don't think that a sprinkle on that is that crazy at all. I think the series is a little bit closer than the odds are suggesting, but I don't love the series either way. I do think if there was to be an LCK one, it probably would be this one, but again, that's still a little bit of a stretch when you look at the LPL games. It just feels very like the gap there is a good bit wide, I feel like. KDF versus KT. Obviously, KDF has just been completely and utterly lifeless. I don't think KT's looked particularly interesting either, but KDF truly feels like they are just they kind of just don't deserve to be in this league right now. It feels like you truly took an academy team and moved them up to the upper echelon league, and they're just not ready for that. They are just not that skilled yet. So for that reason, like, I can understand the odds on this one. KT have again not looked particularly great either in their own right. They've lost to LSB. They beat Hanwha, lost to T1. They've looked like okay, and I think that's good enough against this KDF team that's been pretty terrible so far. So, I mean, the pick will be KT, but again, this is definitely one where I'm going to have no exposure at all. I don't find this one too interesting, although we could look at the KDF defeats. I don't think KDF's been giving up a good bit. I don't recall them like giving up too much in their defeats. They gave up 20 and 14, so that's pretty solid. Over here, they gave up 14 and 12, but these were very quick defeats. Over here, KDF, they gave up 14 and 8, or no, this is a defeat. 14 and 16. I guess those are okay. I feel like I'm missing a series here. I know that was just a 3. I just wanted to look at the ones with Mohammed. So, I mean, I guess though they have not been that bad, but still, either way, it just feels like you're eating so much chalk here that it's just not worth it. I mean, KT, maybe KT ends up being a little bit under-owned. Maybe people are going to go to like the likes of AL and FPX. Maybe people are just going to X out LCK too quickly. And you could get some decent ownership on them. That would be, again, that's kind of the max I'm thinking of. Like, I would have a little bit of exposure to KT, maybe just to get a little bit overweight on the field and then call it there. I think they're okay. But again, I just don't know how. I'm just not an ownership person. I've never been good at guessing ownership. I don't have the pulse on the community like maybe I should. But maybe they're going to be a little bit overlooked. But that's probably it. I'll probably just have to leave it there. Again, I do like the FPX and LGD combo a lot. Maybe you could mix in some of that decent LSB underdog money. A sprinkle of it. Maybe you wanted to get a little bit of the KT roster. Maybe they're a little bit overlooked. Maybe people are going to go to Gen G over KT. Maybe that's an advantage. It does look like KT is pretty insanely expensive, so that would be a decent way to get a little bit unique. I did like some of the KT drafts as well, so I'm gonna have to work on getting some of the more, I guess, kind of advanced stats going here, because we are a little bit into the league now. We can start putting some of the stats together. So, yeah, I think that'll be it. I do like LGD. I do like FPX a good bit. I don't hate the LCK overall. I think there are some decent ways you could go with about it. Again, I do like LSB versus Gen G a little bit. I think that's just closer than the odds indicate. And KDF versus KT, it's hard to find a reason to like the KDF side, but maybe KT goes a little bit overlooked. I'm not sure. I think maybe sprinkling them a little bit in what could be a 2-0. I think there's definitely a very good possibility that if KT 2-0s KDF and every other game was like a 2-1, then you're going to need some KT in there. So who knows? Maybe that's the direction you need to go. But yeah, I think that'll be it for me today. Hopefully you guys, got everything you could out of this one. So I'll see you guys all again tomorrow. I believe we should have a regular 4-gamer tomorrow. I'm not sure how the LCK and LPL will work with the LCK starting earlier, but as long as we're getting a decent slate, I'll be there and making a video for it. So thank you guys for tuning in, and I'll see you guys when I see you.